Hi, we're going to look at an idea of how to answer a question. And the question is, it's a theoretical one, so it's one that's made up. It's about how cells get substances in and out of them. Now, the question that we're going to invent is going to be one of those nasty old extended ones. So compare and contrast. Let's go with diffusion and osmosis. So how do you do that? How do you tackle a question like that? What I'm going to do, how do you prepare for a question like that? Because things like this are going to turn up in your exam. So what do you do? Well, the first thing is, personally, I would, in terms of revision, I'm going to need to know my stuff. I'm going to have a good, clear, cohesive set of notes. To do that, I'm going to look at the notes I've got in my book. I'm going to look at the caboodle stuff that we've got online. I'm going to look at the frog stuff. I'm going to talk to my teacher maybe. If it's something I'm not sure about, I'm going to try and do something about it. I need to have a good, clear understanding of what's going on. But that sometimes isn't enough. Sometimes, actually, it's the question that's the problem. I'm not sure how to answer the question. To help you with this style of question, I would say use a Venn diagram. So a Venn diagram, basically, you'll have seen these a lot, especially if a couple of us teach you because we love them. You draw two intersecting circles. Don't hang up about them being perfect. They don't have to be. You just have to be big enough to write things in. And anything that we pick one side and we go diffusion, and one side is osmosis, and I'm going to rub this out. You know what's going to happen. It's okay. Okay? It's going to be a bit there, right? My writing's not the neatest. That's kind of not the point of this exercise, this bit. So, the regions that are here is only true of diffusion. Things I write in this bit here. Things I write in this bit are only true of osmosis. And things I write in this bit are true of both. So whenever I'm looking at the compare bit of the question, it's going to be all about this middle region. And where I'm talking about the contrast, it's going to be all about this region. So let's look at what we can do. So I know that diffusion is a passive process. I also know from my notes that osmosis is a passive process. So the first thing is, I'm going to write in the middle, they're both passive. The second thing I know is they're both about substances getting in and out, entering and leaving cells. Now, from my notes, I've got this passive movement of substances into and out of cells. Now the word passive is all to do with energy. So I'm going to probably put in here in brackets, if I've got enough space, I'd write in energy. So what's different? Well, the best way to do it is actually to draw down the diagrams. And I would encourage you to use pictures where you can, because things stick better. So if I'm trying to visualize what happens with diffusion, the particles naturally spread out. So from high concentration to low. So the movement is from where there's a lot of the particles to where there's very few of them. And the particles invariably are salts, sugars, stuff like that, in a plant cell in particular, or they might be gases. So there's a wide range of things that do that. Whereas if I look at osmosis, osmosis is across a semi-permeable membrane, which just means it's a skin with holes in it. And what you've got is you've got lots of big salt particles, and they can't get through the gaps. And they're surrounded by, and I'm deliberately changing the colour, I hope you can see this, little blue dots. Now if I look at the concentrations, on the left the concentration is very dilute, but on the right the concentration is very high. However, there's a lot more blue dots on the left than the right. So by diffusion, they're going to diffuse across, and they're going to move across from the area of low concentration to the area of high concentration. So one of the contrasts is low to high concentration. So it's the opposite way round. And the other big one is it's water particles only. Osmosis is a water thing. So whenever I look at this answer, I want to include these ideas. So this is part of I'm thinking ahead and thinking the kind of question that might turn up. I want to organise my thoughts and prepare. So, and I might even do this in an exam, sitting at the side if I had enough time, if I thought I did. But I certainly would do things like this the night before. I'm going to put a double underline to keywords, to words that I want to make sure I get in there, and key ideas. So I want this bit definitely in. I want the idea that salt's in there, but I definitely want, if I can find it, passive. This bit, I want to put in this idea semi-permeable. And I'm going to run out of space, so I'm just going to knock over the side. Hey, it's a plan, you know? So, and that I'm going to bring in, because that's a technical term, and I want to be able to explain that. So for my first bit, number 1, I'm going to go number 2 and number 3, and I'll explain why in a minute. So for this answer, number 1, I won't write the 1 down, but in my head I'm organising my thoughts. I'm going to say both osmosis and diffusion are passive processes, are passive, and then the reason I've underlined it is a technical term. I want to show the examiner I know what that means. So I'm going to say no energy needed, because that's a really good way of hopefully guaranteeing that mark, by which substances enter and leave cells. So that's the compare bit. And if it's out of 6 marks, I'm in full sentences, I hope now I've got 2. For my second section, I'm now going to look at diffusion in its own. Diffusion, I want to do these twice, so I'm going to look at diffusion, is the movement, I've said it's passive already, so it's fine, of a wide range, so like my sugars and my salts, of particles from high to low concentrations, and then what I'm going to do is in my head, I've got this little 3, this is my third point, but it's not really going to be that way. I'm going to keep it as the same sentence, whereas, yes, I'm using a connective, whereas osmosis is the movement of water in the opposite direction. And I'm hoping that makes sense. So what I would do is I would go through that and I would check my spelling, my punctuation, my grammar, and I've missed out a semi-permeable membrane, so I want to put that in across a semi-permeable membrane, because that's a good word, and if I've remembered it, I may as well milk it in there. Permeable, so we hyphen, membrane. Just means it's something with holes in it. Now if I wanted to seal that mark, I might draw down those 2 diagrams and label them, just to be on the safe side. It certainly would help me to explain it, but actually it's a pretty good answer right there. So both osmosis and diffusion are passive, brackets no energy needed, by which substances passive processes would read better. As I read it back, oh yeah, passive processes, by which substances enter and leave cells. Full stop, new sentence. Diffusion is the movement of a wide range of particles from high to low concentrations, whereas osmosis is the movement of water in the opposite direction across the semi-permeable membrane. Job done, 6 marks, happy days. Now, for you, what I want you to do is I want you to now, to give yourself a bit of extra work, I want you to do the same process, but this time I want you to do it for compare and contrast osmosis and active transport. Consult your notes. And I want you to compare and contrast diffusion and active transport. So that's your task. Go for it.